Thank you so much, David, for joining me today. Very excited to finally get to chat, talk a little bit about your journey and some things that I'm passionate about. Been covering sort of impact and sustainable brands for close to 10 years now. So I've seen the environment change quite a bit. I've seen brands come and go, and a really interesting time, I think, for brands in this space. Before we get into Real Paper, I wanted to kind of talk about your journey because you have really interesting one. You come from a lot of different backgrounds where, your position now as CEO of Real Paper, you've kind of done all the things necessary to be in this spot and help it grow. But talk about that journey you've had, your career path before Real Paper.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me. So I started my career at Procter & Gamble. So grew up in kind of large CPG brand management. I spent 18 years at P&G, 18 great years. It's a great training ground where you get a lot of exposure for leadership opportunities and just understand what it takes to be a good, solid, well-rounded operator in CPG. My time there, I never actually worked on our paper business there. I spent most of my time on Crest and Tide and Oral-B. But my last role with the company, I think, was the one that was really transformational for me, in that I was leading global innovation for Tide. And our organization kind of was presented with a challenge to say, hey, let's think differently beyond just the typical incremental innovation that we've done historically. So I capitalized on that opportunity, eventually went to the president and said, hey, give me a little bit of money to go start this new venture. I think we need to be playing on another part of the market that we're not touching today, that's called out of home or away from home laundry. Is equally as large as the in-home business. Plus, you just have some dynamics going on in terms of density, of population growth, consumers living in large urban metropolitan markets. They may not have access to a washer and dryer. Time is their really constrained resource. So let's provide them a service where they can get the experts of Tide to do the laundry for them. And so we created an app service that would allow users to order laundry and delivery, or laundry and dry cleaning delivery, pickup and delivery. And I basically, kind of got the blessing, got a little bit of money to run it for 6 to so months. And he sent me up here to Chicago, and I just kind of, all right, I got to figure out how to build this, which was just an amazing experience and opportunity. I hired 3 other people to help get it off the ground. We were working out of incubators. So it was just like truly disconnected from the corporate engine.
Right.
And the thrill and chaos of trying to build something in that early stage was just, I don't know, it was fueling.
It's fun. It's fun.
I loved it. So I did that for 2 years, and then, we kind of found a path to scaling it and accelerated that plan through an acquisition of another company. And so it was a nice little ribbon to put on the end of that project that, was just like I said, kind of a career highlight for me. And so at that time, I really wanted to stay in the early stage work, loved kind of building brands and teams and understanding new business models to tap into changing consumer habits and motivations. And I went to Kraft Heinz for a period of time to run a division there called Springboard Brands. And the aim of that organization was really to identify what are those emerging brands that can help set up the portfolio of legacy brands that may not be positioned to win with evolving needs, find those new transformational brands that play better on health and organic, some of those emerging trends in food and bev, and figure out a way to partner with them from a 12-week accelerator program all the way up through acquisition. And enjoyed my time there. Unfortunately, I think the company was kind of going through its own transformation. It had a few challenges and basically ended up sunsetting that organization. But in that role, I actually met Livio Bastergio, who's the founder of Real Paper. He had also founded a snacks brand called Hippie Snacks, which is a chickpea-based natural organic snack food, which was just growing like crazy, one of the fastest growing natural snack brands. And what we got to talking a little bit, he shared more about kind of his vision of kind of building a portfolio of brands that could address opportunity areas in large categories where there really wasn't a brand proposition that resonated well with Millennial and Gen Z, and, would certainly improve overall category benefits of better for you, better for the world, better for the environment. So just love that vision and mission that he had set forth there. And at that time, he actually had a concept for this brand called Real that he was looking to launch soon, because this would have been like early 2019. And I loved, I think initially just the visual identity of the brand, the logo, like how it came to life. It felt modern, like it had a really strong purpose behind it. And we stayed connected. A year later, I ended up coming over and joining him at Green Park Brands. And, within about 6 or 7 months, stepped over to run the business full time.
That's awesome. It's I love that journey and path because they're all such a stepping stone. It's really cool to see. I think people thinking about how do we create these sort of modern sustainable brands for this category of consumers. The CPG is such an interesting place to be because it's kind of where we go almost every day. We go to a store, whether it's online or in real life, and we see so many brands, right? I'm sure you might know a better number than me, but just in a grocery store in general, how many brands are in.
Oh, yeah.
It's
you get to the SKU level, which is a multiple of like
really
six.
just quite astonishing.
Yeah.
It really is. But I kind of wanted to touch on your time at Green Park and maybe what were some learnings there, because Procter & Gamble, you kind of see it from a corporate lens. You look at scale, obviously working with Crest, you're looking at, big SKUs, big sales, big revenue. But when you came to Green Park, you sort of looked at smaller brands and starting out and saying, hey, let's get our first sale, right? And then 10 and then 20 and then 1,000 sales. What would you learn? What did you learn from that experience? And maybe what insights could you give maybe other CPG brands that are thinking about starting something not in the real paper niche, but it not in the toilet paper niche, but in something else that they might feel passionate about?
I'd say there are probably a few things that come to mind. Let me start with three. I think the first piece is, and this is what Livio's been brilliant at, and through some of the partnerships he has, is have a really compelling brand proposition that's going after a sizable opportunity that's kind of market ready. So identify the category, what are the gaps and the issues within that category that you're looking to address, and then come up with that brand proposition, how it comes to life, what's the tone of voice, what are the benefits that you're going to provide, and the problem areas in the categories you'll address, and get very hyper focused on that. Because when you're stepping into a large category, there's just a lot of noise. And like you say, in a grocery store too, in the context of someone's walking into a grocery store, they're just met with all of these other distractions, like their phone and their kids. They're not going to have time to really go through a shelf set. So you've got to be able to stand out. You've got to be able to trigger some muscle or memory reaction that says, oh, I saw that here. That's making a connection. That I like that. Okay, now what is it? Okay, you've got me. You've bought in. Now I can engage and understand if the proposition is right with me. So all of that needs to kind of occur within this mental framework where we're more distracted than ever. And so being very single-mindedly focused on like a very consistent visual design and a very single-minded benefit statement is key. So getting that brand proposition right is absolutely number one. I think the second piece is just the product itself. So, the branding can make that initial connection and drive enough appeal and desire to get them to try it. But I think where a lot of brands tend to fail is that you still have to deliver on the usage experience. Because if you don't, they're not going to buy it again, and you're just dead in the water.
They're one-time consumer. Yeah, one-time.
Yeah, and then you're spending all this money to acquiring users that will never build a business of scale, and so you're just wasting your time. And that's where I think it's a little bit harder for folks that maybe haven't been fortunate enough to spend time in an organization that's heavily resourced, like a P&G or a Unilever or someone else out there that does some product testing and concept work, just to understand, like, are people, when they buy this product, they use it, what's their reaction? Does it drive delight? Does it create some intrigue or desire to do more? Are there significant gaps that, like, hey, you better address these before you start looking to scale this business, or like I said, you're going to be dead in the water? And then the third piece, which is just foundational, is just the financial business plan of what you're trying to do. And this is where, I think I spend a fair amount of time of just trying to understand the economics of, like, okay, what are we going to charge for our product? So what's the end pricing going to be? How does that compare to competitors out in the market? Can we command a premium? If so, how much? What's the cost structure look like? It's not going to be pretty early on, but what's that roadmap to eventually get to somewhere that's sustainable? Because again, if you can't get there, then you're also like, you're trying to push water uphill, and it's almost an inevitable path of, I can't create a viable long-term business here because I can never get the financials to work. And it requires a lot of investment. I think this is why typically large companies don't do the best job at creating new brands because they
Mm.
don't have the patience to build something.
Hmm.
So you're going to have initial investments up front. You just have to have a clear plan. Like, okay, if we get here to this milestone, I know I can check off I get the repeat to where I need it. I'll continue to invest this much to acquire customers because I'm anticipating my lifetime value is going to be Y, and so I can justify that, and that'll allow me to continue to raise money from investors and just kind of take a sequential step of like, okay, I'm going to get to this next tier or milestone, and then I'll get to the next one. And over time, kind of like you're saying, the career, like every little incremental step ultimately gets you to your end destination.
Let's talk about real paper now.
Yeah.
A couple things. When somebody asks you, what real paper is, they're not familiar with sort of the industry and not familiar with real yet. How do you explain it to them? And second, what was it about the brand or sort of the pitch that was given to you to have you come over and be CEO full time and help grow it?
Yeah, so Real Paper is a sustainable household paper brand. So we look to save our trees and protect our forests from being cut down to create single-use household paper products. And we also want to make sure that anything that we're packaging, we're eliminating any single-use household plastics. So that was, for me, what resonated with this proposition is you've got a really large category at $18 billion roughly across toilet paper and paper towel. It's a category, nearly every household uses every day. But at the same time, the US, we are one of the highest consumers of single-use paper products per capita of any country across the world. And most of the products that we create today are using trees that are more often than not taken from forests. And when you do so, like you're taking a tree that took 40 to 50 years to grow and you're cutting it down, creating a single-use product that then gets flushed into the waste system and can never be repurposed again. And you just try to run the numbers a little bit of like, okay, 40 to 50 years to grow, our rate of usage of paper products is increasing. We're cutting those down. It's a matter of time. We're removing trees and forests from our ecosystem, which play a vital role in helping to absorb all of the man-made carbon that we're continue to create and put out in the environment. So it's like, okay, there's got to be a better solution there. And that's where, we got into looking at other regions and other fibers. And, bamboo in particular it's a great fiber for tissue making because it tends to be longer, especially certain species of it. And bamboo is a grass. It's not a tree. It's one of the fastest growing plants in the world. It can grow, up to 3 feet a week. So it's just this huge regenerative tree. And when you cut it down, it regenerates from the same root. You're not disrupting the soil systems. And so,
gotcha.
sometimes if you're going in for efficiencies, big, loggers will go in and they'll clear cut a forest. Well, when they do that, they're also disrupting the soil. Yeah. So not only are they removing that tree that was sucking carbon, but then they're also releasing carbon sinks within the soil. And that soil's degraded that it can't easily, like you can't replant trees and just expect in 40 or 50 years it's going to grow there. Sometimes it takes like 100 years for that area to regenerate to the point of where it was before it was clear cut. So it's just, I think, kind of those dynamics are like, okay, you've got a big category that, you can potentially make a huge impact because small changes compounded over many people end up, multiplying to a significant impact. And so that was, I think really for me, the category opportunity and just the brand and what it stood for, the simplicity and elegance of, I've got rolls back there in the background too, but just this logo that's so creative, like the unrolling of a reel or a roll to create the R and the logo, just kind of was this iconic asset that you could see could really flex and work across a lot of different touch points. And so it could create that visual identity and kind of memory trigger to like, oh yeah, that's the sustainable brand that I've seen. Like that's, I like that.
You said the key word there that we're going to touch on next, and sustainable brand, right? It's, there's a lot that has gone into this space. There's a lot of really, really powerful brands that do really, really good things. I think there's a lot of brands that, put that sustainability on themselves, and maybe they're not so, sustainable, or there's just certain levels of brands in this space. And, it's difficult sometimes for consumers to really understand, I think, what actually is sort of sustainable or what is regenerative. There's so many different labels now on things and so many different words and things like that, it becomes overwhelming. And then I'm scared that consumers will get so overwhelmed that they'll just kind of go back to what they've done before, right? It just default to that because it's there's no anxiety over it, right? It's just simple. It's just like, this is what I've been doing. Is that like, but you've oversaw a lot of traditional sort of brands, and now you've seen several different sustainable brands, so to speak, grow up, let's say. What's your sort of pulse on the industry right now as it kind of matures into what it is, and maybe some of the good things that happen along the way, and maybe some of the bad things?
I think you bring up some good points. Is that the challenge is that there is so much information out there, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it misinformation, and so many products that it's overwhelming and can get very confusing. And a lot of times I think human nature is the default of where I'm confused as I just have doubt and I'm like, okay, just forget it. Like I want to just forget. I don't want to think about this. I don't know. I'm just going to kind of continue to do the same thing I have. And I certainly think that's a big risk and a challenge with all of this. You see it across food and bev a lot. I think there's plant-based meats or alternative meats like are in this ebb and like, is it better? Is it good? But I think the important thing that I just try to keep in mind is like, these are incremental steps we're going to take. We're going to get better. Are we perfect today? No. But if we can get better, if we can start to impact the category, start to use more sustainable regenerative fibers in a product that's single-use household paper, which can never be recycled because it does dirty things so let's just find a better alternative to it. Part of the challenge with that is even just within the manufacturing process itself, and that, you have equipment that's used for tissue making is really, really expensive. And so the only way to make that economically viable is I have to run a lot of the same thing all the time. And so there's not the appropriate incentives in place. And you see this across like all industries as well. There's not really incentives in place for anyone on the production side to change for the better because it's too expensive and they're going to dilute their business. And it's just the way whole economic structure of everything is set up. It's just, there's not those incentives. So like with any model, like you need some disruptors to kind of come in to play through that early phase to start to establish that there is a market here, there's demand. I can create it to such a scale that, okay, this is meaningful and it's been de-risked so that all of the other manufacturers can then come in to say, okay, now I can start to transition and I've got something of considerable scale and mass that I can drop into my supply chain infrastructure and start to produce without it being so dilutive to my overall performance. That's kind of how I think about it. It's like, well, let's just make incremental steps and we will start to hit these inflection points where that rate of change will accelerate. And it's pretty apparent, I think, as you look at every subsequent generation of just their mindset of how they care about the world as they're faced with things like climate change or even, COVID or other things. Like they feel this connection. They understand that they're more interdependent than maybe others have been. And so I think I'm just hopeful and optimistic that you'll continue to see more collaboration, more people doing better for the world. And it ultimately will hit some inflection point where it becomes the norm. The problem is it's just that doesn't happen in 5 years. It happens in, 20 to maybe even 40. So we're planting seeds now that will hopefully bear significant fruit, maybe at the end of this decade, maybe not till the end of the next decade. But in any event, we feel good about we're pushing things forward and making progress.
I want to talk about what sort of worked well, I think, from a direct-to-consumer point of view versus an in-store point of view versus Facebook or Pinterest ads. Like, give us an overview of, like, I guess, what has worked really well for Real Paper, and maybe some of the things that you might have thought would work well, and maybe they didn't, right? Some of the hurdles that have been faced so far during the growth stage.
So I think we were, from just a timing standpoint, we were pretty fortunate that we had launched in 2019 because in March of 2020, we had this awful global event.
Everybody was home.
A pandemic. And the weird reaction of folks at home of like, what's going on? What do I do? Like this panic, for some reason spread to toilet paper.
Yeah.
And people were buying it off of shelves like crazy, to the point of like, it was this hysteria and panic that grocery store shelves, everywhere was empty. You couldn't keep toilet paper in stock. And so people started to go online to look for, okay, I need toilet paper. Where do I get toilet paper? So we were well positioned to capitalize that, and that there was a tailwind of people coming online and looking to other channels to purchase a household staple like toilet paper. So we really benefited from that. Now, we could have benefited more because on March 17th, we sold like a month and a half worth of inventory in like 12 hours.
Wow.
And, there's only so much you can do as you're getting contract production. The lead time to get new inventory in is 45 days. So we were out of stock. We could have done more, but we were very fortunate to have that opportunity. But I'd say we were well positioned to capitalize on that. We had a lot of the fundamentals of a really clean, simple site. We had strong ads and leveraging a lot of the meta network like Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms. Google certainly was key. That we grew very well. And so that drove the direct-to-consumer business trial. I think going back to what I said earlier is all that is just a total waste of time if the product doesn't deliver. Right. And so fortunately, we had at the time been working back with our manufacturer in several iterations of trying to improve the product, getting it a little bit better, making sure that we know consumers want sustainable, but they're not going to trade off on performance. So that's historically been the problem with a lot of sustainable paper products that were maybe made of recycled fiber, is that it felt like more of a value play. So we were really keen on, we wanted to deliver a premium experience that was sustainable. And so by spending so much time focused on product quality, when we brought those consumers in and closed them on our site, we saw the repeat come through. So we were seeing 80+% of our subscribers buying a second box, which is phenomenal. And then from there, you've just got a compounded business that grows really quickly. So that's really been the fuel, and where we've been fortunate and opportunistic at the right time to really grow the DTC business. I think your second question was on the retail side. So I think, taking that success and then bringing it to, okay, how do we win in retail? Yeah. Because if we're going to make any kind of impact in this category, we have to win at retail. That's still where, almost 90% of the category is purchased at a physical store. And, we were fortunate to get an opportunity to talk with Target. A leading retailer has brought digitally native brands to market in big ways, especially on, brands that stood for sustainability, elegance, and design, like Method and others. And so we had a 200 store test with them. It started in June of 21, and great. We had the opportunity to get in the door. They were great partners, very fortunate to give us that opportunity. But then I think, we took advantage of that opportunity. We crafted a really robust launch plan to make sure that within those first 2 to 3 months, we're going to drive significant trial to get the momentum working in our favor, so that Target sees us as a win that they will continue to disproportionately invest resources behind. So yeah, we did that. And within, I'd say, 2 to 3 months, we were doing about 2 to 3x of what the buyer expected in store velocity. And so then that led to other successes. So then they expanded us nationwide in April of 2022. And it's just kind of leveraging that success that, okay, win there, deliver in the incremental stores, demonstrate the incrementality and the growth potential of what we're doing for Target to help build their business while we're building ours, so that there's kind of joint incentives in place for, hey, why are we spending our time doing on this? What is it doing to help build and support our overall goals, respectively?
It's such a huge win to get that the retail space. I've talked to so many, brands. Is that sort of really one of the hardest things to do, as a young sort of startup and brand, is to sort of get that retail aspect. And a lot of, like you said, maybe goes back to branding and sort of simplicity and the decision making of a lot of these things that consumers have to go through. What was that process like for you guys in having that conversation? I guess, again, maybe what are some of the advice that you would give to, to future brands and future entrepreneurs that are trying to get into the retail space?
It's really tough to get that initial conversation. Yeah. So I think that's the toughest point, especially you've got buyers at all these different retailers. Yeah. They're trying to deal with 8 million different situations, people coming at them, different priorities, and new items. They're just flooded all the time with, hey, carry our product. So you've got to break through the clutter in some way. I think fortunately for me and Livio's, we had experience
Yep.
working with Target. So we kind of knew what was important to them and how to
Yeah.
position ourselves as, again, hey, this will jointly benefit us. We're here to build your business. And so it's getting somehow cutting through the noise, getting that initial conversation. But then once you do, make sure you absolutely nail it. And you're talking in their language as well. Of like, this isn't just about like our brand of business. We're going to help you grow your business. And we've been able to show that 50% of our buyers had not purchased the bath tissue category in the prior 12 months. So that's pretty significant, despite the fact that they're in Target stores already as much as 2 times a month. So you've got people in your store that aren't buying a category that is a nearly 100% penetrated category. That comes down to you not having the right assortment. So it's pretty compelling data to say, yes, they need to continue to grow and support us because we can help build their category development. The more that they have assortment for a household essential item, the more trips it's going to drive for their guests. And then they're going to continue to buy an assorted basket of goods with Target. So that's a big piece, kind of going on quite a bit here.
No, but that, I mean, it's such an important thing to think about, because I think, like you said, I think a lot of people go in pitching, themselves rather than kind of pitching how you can help them, which is a dynamic that I think is interesting to think about.
And that's just the whole persuasive selling construct that I'm sure you could, like, if any listeners want to go online and Google, they'll probably find it. But ask questions to your buyer to understand what they value, what's important to them. And then you can just frame everything back to helping address their challenges or, really growth opportunities. But the last piece I wanted to touch on is I think just when you launch, it's not just putting it out and hoping it sells. You have to be very intentional about creating a plan that's going to support that. I think the other thing that we were pretty intentional about is just channel prioritization, because you can start to get into this game of like, well, we don't want to cannibalize too many of our sales from this channel to grow this other one. Because, is that really what's best for the business? But for us and our team, it was very clear, like, we have to make this a success because 90% of this category is purchased in brick and mortar and retail. We have to have this be successful for us to unlock other opportunities and other channels and ultimately have a big impact. Like, the other channels will come along and continue to grow with that. We'll have kind of an omni-channel plan that'll allow us to prioritize and say, when do we focus here versus there? But we can't be scared of losing subscribers to Target. So we would, on our homepage, the top of the banner, like, now available in Target. And everywhere that we were in that first year was driving people to say, find us in Target. We're now in your local Target, or in 200 at the time. But here's the stores where you can find us. You can also order us online. And that just helped to drive success. I mean, in particular, what we saw was about 2.5x of our business was driven online. So sales were initiated either through Target's app or on Target.com. And so it was another signal to Target to say, you're helping us to win with millennial kind of digitally savvy consumers that otherwise we may have lost to some other e-commerce partner. And so when you start to see that, like, hey, here's where we can fit in strategically to help Target grow their business, and then you just continue to hammer it and just fuel it more and more to say, look, we're having a greater impact. This is helping you to win in the broader marketplace. You start to create those little stories that generate the excitement, which continues to, provide that support that you need to continue to grow your business there.
In those conversations, is exclusivity a given in these sort of conversations?
It wasn't for us. They'd said, hey, we don't need exclusivity. You guys can go other. I think there is some benefit to being very intentional, though, and starting small and making sure that you learn your lessons in a smaller context versus maybe casting a wide net and then you realize, hey, there's something I need to fix and change. And now it's a lot messier to untangle that. So we were like, hey, let's do this. It's very disciplined. We have 200 stores. We'll see success there. We'll grow from there. We'll expand nationally. We'll make sure it works in kind of all major metro markets. And then we'll have the nice case to present to other retailers to be like, look, this is a winning proposition. It's proven. We don't have to continue to sell you on the what if and the hope and promise. Like, there's concrete data here that shows this is a winning proposition.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen such amazing growth in such a short period of time. I mean, just a few years. We'll end a little bit on the future here. And what does the next 3 to 5 years look like? What are some of the goals and successes you and the team would like to see sort of in that time span?
Yeah. I mean, the primary goal is just continue to grow and grow so in a way where the engine becomes more efficient so that we are self-sustaining. So, retail development continues to be a big focus. So we just launched in Harris Teeter this week in North Carolina. There's a bunch of other natural and conventional grocers coming online in the next couple of months. So proof points across other retail channels. And then, through that learning cycle of, we know we stand out at the shelf at Target and it sells, but in a grocery store context, it's a totally different environment. How do we stand out there? What's the right pricing and promotional strategy to support it and be successful? So that becomes a big focus as we continue to build, our e-commerce and DTC businesses. Long term, it's just product innovation. So a lot of work being done just to how do we continually improve the product? How do we introduce, new items and improve those? So we've got a paper towel product in addition to our toilet paper, launching other household paper items that would otherwise be single-use tree-based products.
Tissue paper. I mean, that's a great one too, which I'll have. Yeah.
Exactly. And just continuing to expand that and start to build, more of the infrastructure and supply chain that's closer to the market that we're serving with partners that we can create, some innovative products with that will continue to break through. I mean, I think our model has us saving like 8 million trees by the year 2030. Wow. We donate 50 cents for every box we sell back to One Tree Planted, that I think is one of your partner organizations, which is a great organization. So we want to reforest where we can and make sure we're protecting our environment. But ultimately, I think it's just try to reduce the number of tree-based single-use paper products that consumers are using in their home and giving them a better alternative where there's not significant trade-offs. And if we do that well and continue to, be very disciplined in the execution, we'll build something that's meaningful here in size, that will ultimately become, hopefully a 5% share or a 10% share in the category, which, that doesn't
huge,
seem
though.
big, but when you're talking about $18 billion category, that's a huge business here. And it's the right time, right? Because we talked about the mindset of millennials and a Gen Z. Everyone's becoming more conscious about the little changes they can make that ultimately will have a big impact. And this just feels like one of those categories where it's a simple change.
And you don't have to change your lifestyle. I mean, I think that's the biggest part of all this is you can kind of do what you've always done. It's just shifting, obviously, your wallet a little bit, but also just shifting your mindset and just your vision, right, on the aisles that you're on a little bit. It's the simple things that, like you said, I mean, that's sometimes that at scale is going to make some of the biggest impact because like going back to 8% of the market or 5% of the market, if we just change even 1%, 2% of consumer habits, we're talking about consumerism of $1 trillion industry, right? And we shifting 1-2% of that, we start to see some significant changes in reforestation and sustainability, but also in job creation. I think the industry grows and grows. I think that opportunity to build sort of career paths for individuals who might not have it before, I think is also a huge opportunity for the sector.
Yeah, without a doubt. And even just we're kind of talking about that it's tough to get more sustainable solutions to build that traction. It seems slow, but I think just the first part of just getting people to question or reconsider what they're doing across different behaviors that become so, I think, habitual. Like, well, I'm just going to buy this paper product because it's what I've always bought. It's what I grew up with. My parents bought for me. But just to stop and think about it, even if they don't buy something more sustainable initially, to get them to consider that over time, you'll start to have an impact. It's just slow because it takes so many exposures and overcoming these barriers of like, I would do it, but this, and then like, well, now we address that. Now we address the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, education is a huge part of this, right? I mean, that's why I do this for the most part.
Absolutely.
But it's that simple thing. Cause I think when you present consumers with the pitch that you've created and other brands have created, and then also, like you said, to me on the back end, does the product contend with the products that they have historically used. And if you can match, and not just like design, but also in capability and execution on the product, and it be just as amazing of a product as traditional things have been, then all these other positive aspects come in on the front end and the back end. It becomes a no-brainer for consumers. And look, as we scale, price points will come down, and then we'll be able to compete at that level, right? That's sort of the next maturation of all this. But I always like to say, even if you just buy, maybe it's, you don't shift your habits, altogether at once, right? But maybe you buy let's just use Reel, right? You buy Reel maybe, once every 3 months right now, maybe not every time you go to the store, you're able to buy it just from a price point standpoint. But if you just do it, once out of every few times, that little part makes a big difference as well. Because again, at scale, we're talking about in this industry is massive. So a total shift to me is somehow it's not as easy as that. Sometimes it takes takes those little bitty purchases, over time, and then you go from there.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David, for taking the time. I know you're busy. Love the brand, love the organization, love the company. Love to see the startup story, idea, design, execution, and now, in that growth stage. So amazing to see. Best of luck to you and the team for the next decade.
Thanks so much, Grant. It's good being here.